So hello, everyone. Please feel free to continue to engage with each other in the chat and let us know where you're from and who you are. I am Evelyn Moon. I am Director of Learning and Content Strategy here at Good Grief. I'm currently seated in our Princeton, New Jersey location. And as always, I want to start from a place of gratitude. I am grateful for the opportunity to spend the next hour with all of you today. I'm grateful for our presenter. I'm really excited for this topic. I believe mindfulness is something that we can all engage with to navigate stressful times. Today's session is part of our Good Grief Community webinar series. Every school year, we will bring you content, experts, information, and this is just a way to extend the work that we do outside of our centers and into the virtual space. And I just want to say, anyone who's attended today's live Zoom session will receive a follow-up email within the next 48 hours with a certificate of attendance. And anyone who is registered will receive an email with a copy of the recording, so that way you can access it later. But I'd also like to introduce maybe a new face to this series, my colleague, Annette Mendez, who is Good Grief's Curriculum and Training Manager, and also next month's presenter. So Annette, say hello.
Hi, everyone. I am so excited. And I just want to echo what Evelyn just said about being grateful. I'm always so unbelievably grateful to meet with all of you and to see our presenters and to bring this information to everyone. At the end, I'll talk a little bit more about the presentation that I'll be giving next month, but I'm just happy to be here.
Wonderful. So I have a feeling most of you probably know who Good Grief is since you registered for the webinar. But for those of you who may be new to us, we build resilience in children, strengthen families, and empower communities to grow from loss and adversity. And for most of our organization's history, we have been providing completely free and unlimited peer support programs to grieving children and families, starting at age 3 and going through young adulthood, as well as spousal and partner loss, child loss, caregiver groups, young adult groups. But in recent years, our work has been growing into schools, the healthcare industry, corporations. Really, we just want to empower professionals and parents and broader community members to be able to utilize our information and support the needs of grieving children and families wherever they are. So we do that through our nights of support, our schoolwork. Since you are here, you will get some information about our Good Grief Spring Institute in our follow-up emails. It is happening in March, on March 16th at the Pingree School. PD, we do parent and caregiver information, and the community webinar series, which you know all about.
Thank you, Evelyn. So I have the honor of introducing our presenter, and I'm so excited. We have Diana Pacina, and she is a mindfulness educator. And she's been practicing mindfulness meditation since 2006. She spent more than a month on silent retreat. She studied meditation and mindfulness-based stress reduction at the Brown University School of Public Health, the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion, the Bear School for Buddhist Studies, and the Insight Meditation Society. Diana currently offers mindfulness workshops to a variety of population, including those who are navigating through grief and loss. She is also a support group facilitator and a team coordinator at Good Grief, and all-around amazing human. So you're in for quite a treat.
Thank you so much, Annette. And just to echo the gratitude that I certainly am feeling right now for the opportunity to be here and to share this practice with all of you. So I am, as Annette shared, I'm a team coordinator as well as a support group facilitator here at Good Grief. My role is primarily to work with some of our adults, to work with people who've lost a child, lost a spouse, lost a significant member of their family, and are working through that process. And I've had such a wonderful experience here. I am also a longtime practitioner of mindfulness, both through yoga and through meditation, as Annette shared. I practice a form of meditation known as Vipassana or insight meditation. And I just want to share that I am far from being what I would call an expert in meditation. This tradition has so many amazing teachers who have studied and practiced meditation for 50, 60 or more years. and who'd chosen to share that knowledge with the rest of us. I owe an enormous debt to so many. The tradition in which I study, I owe a debt to Joseph Goldstein, Sharon Salzberg, Kamala Masters, John Kabat-Zinn, and really so many others who have touched my life and touched so many lives. And in this digital era, all of us have an opportunity to learn from these people who are the true masters of the history here and the technique and the craft. So I owe a huge debt to them. In addition to my role at Good Grief and my practice of mindfulness, I also come to you today as a mother who has lost a child. This is Eric, a few months before he died. His
Oh,
death
Diana, sorry
yeah,
to interrupt, but
yeah.
I'm not seeing your slides. Is anyone else
You're
seeing
not
your
seeing my
slides?
slides.
No, I thought you were just doing a lovely, warm
Oh gosh.
introduction.
Oh, I'm so sad because I'm showing you such a lovely picture.
It's all right. Technology is great when it works.
It's quite all right and not so great when it doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
All right, so let me give this a shot again and we're gonna see how this goes. Let's try that.
Ah, we can see it now.
Now we
Yes.
can see it.
Thank
Okay, but
you.
now I cannot. So we've got to give me a moment here.
Sure.
Yeah, whatever you need.
Okay.
Oh, now we're seeing your notes.
Now you're seeing the notes. That's not so good either. Not so good either. I warned these very generous ladies before we started that I was much more comfortable with the presentation than with the technology. And as you can see, that is exactly true. So let's just take a step back.
Mm-hmm. And we have such an encouraging group in the
Yes, I was just
chat.
gonna
They're
say that.
wonderful.
Yeah.
I can tell. I know
Yes.
that they're all wonderful.
Yes, technology can be very stressful, Gina. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
There's something in me right now that is somehow avoiding being stressed. So that's actually good. But I do not have any idea why I can't even see at this point the button to share my screen.
Hmm.
It's gone.
You can send one of us the slide or Evelyn the slide since she's or myself and we can share it for you completely.
Yeah, I'm happy to share it for you if you want to, send it over. If it doesn't work, that's fine.
Claiming
Whatever
that
we
I'm
could do
screen
is
sharing. I am not screen sharing. You're not seeing anything?
You are. I can see. Well, now you stopped. You
Yeah,
were seconds ago.
but now I was. All right, let's try again.
It had your notes as well.
Okay. I apologize.
No worries. I often laugh when I run into technological issues and I ask my children for help and they get frustrated with me and I'm like, I taught you how to use a spoon. Like,
For sure,
come on.
right? Yeah, 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 yeah.
Be more patient with mom.
Be more patient with mom for sure.
We didn't have these cool things growing up. We had the Rolodex. I just showed my kids what a Rolodex was, and they were in awe. Wow. Guess I aged myself with that one.
I'm with you. I'm with you. All right. Let's see if we can make this work.
All right, we see your desktop.
Stop. That's a cool picture.
Desktop's good.
That's a nice picture.
What do we see? We see the desktop. Okay, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
That's not really what we want to see, though.
But it is cool.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay. Now what do we see?
Yep, we
Hey, it's
background.
perfect.
Now we're back online. Okay.
We're
All right.
good.
Here
Way
we
to
All
go.
right.
go,
Here
Diane.
we go. All right. I apologize for that, and thank you for being mindful and compassionate. Compassionate. We're going to talk about compassion as we walk through
Of
our
course.
presentation today.
You couldn't find a kinder, more wonderful audience than the folks that come to these webinars. So
I absolutely
I'm gonna
believe.
fade into the background now.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. So as I was about to say, this, who you can now see, is my son, Eric. I come to you today not only as a practitioner of mindfulness, but also as a mother who lost a son. He is 23 in this picture. I wanted to share, as I don't often get a chance to do that anymore. This is about 5 months before we lost him. So Eric's death was entirely unexpected, came out of the blue. I was devastated. So during this time of loss, I found that my mindfulness practice was really the most fundamental part of my process of moving forward. It was a source of comfort. It gradually helped me to work through the pain of the loss and to re-engage with the rest of my life. As time continued to pass, I experienced a really deep gratitude for my practice. And I found myself also growing increasingly curious. What was it about this practice that made me, that helped me recover, that helped me kind of put those pieces of this broken situation back together? And so I took my own deep dive into mindfulness, into the history and how this process worked. And that's what I'm bringing you here today. So in terms of our agenda for today, we're going to talk first just a little bit about stress. We're going to talk about what causes it, how we react to it in our bodies and our minds. We're going to talk a little bit about mindfulness, what it is and what it absolutely isn't. I'm going to give you just a little bit of hands-on experience with the practice. I'm going to introduce this practice that that Annette mentioned, mindfulness-based stress reduction, which I think is directly relevant to our work in dealing with stress of grief, the stress of loss. We are going to talk a bit about compassion, which I know we are apparently all experts already in that field, given your response to me. And we'll leave some time at the end for question and response, and I can certainly share some resources with you at that time as well. So still experiencing technical snafus. So in our daily life, to turn to this topic of stress, we all go through a variety of experiences of situations and environments. Some of those environments are really, really comfortable for us, and others create some level of stress. So this is a chart that many of you may have seen before: the comfort zone, the challenge zone, and the overwhelm zone. So first, starting with our comfort zone, this is a place where we feel at ease as we go through our life. You can actually think of this, harking back to our ancestors who are out in the prairie or the savannah, right? They quite literally had this comfort zone, a territory where they felt comfortable. They kind of mapped it out in their mind. They knew where the dangers were and where they weren't. They were comfortable navigating it. They felt that they could kind of relax, go out about their daily business and feel at home. So for us, our comfort zone might be when we're participating in an activity where we feel really comfortable, when we're maybe at home reading a good book, maybe we're chatting with a friend, in a situation where we feel at ease. The next ring out there is what we call our challenge zone, sometimes also referred to as a learning zone. This is a zone where we feel that we're engaging in perhaps new territory. We're moving a little further out on the prairie. Our senses are maybe a little more on alert. We're on the lookout for danger. but we feel that we have kind of the resources, whether within us or whether in our environment, to handle what's going on. Beyond the challenge zone, we get beyond the challenge zone, we get out to an area where we can think of it as overwhelm. So it's too much. It's too much. Perhaps something has happened that's really frightened us. Perhaps there are a number of brand new stimuli just kind of all happening at once. So for example, maybe you had kind of a stressful day at work, maybe you're in the midst of an argument with your partner, and then you're driving home and you get rear-ended, and you're crazy. Your mind has gone, you can't focus, you're really, really uncomfortable. You are now in overwhelm. And, honestly, it's not a lot of fun, right? We don't like spending time in that zone. So I want to take a closer look at what happens when we are in that overwhelm zone, because often we're put there by these factors that we commonly refer to as stress. So this poor guy, he's having a bad day. His brain has detected some sort of danger, right? And it has activated what we commonly call the stress response. Now, you may have learned about this sometime along the road, fight or flight, right? So his brain has activated his sympathetic nervous system. It's released all these hormones, powerful hormones, getting his body ready to fight or to run away. So you can see his pupils are dilating to take in more information about the situation. All of his senses are actually becoming more acute. His heart rate is speeding up. His breathing is speeding up. The blood is actually being diverted from other parts of his body to his muscles, getting him ready to either grab that sword and fight or to very quickly run away. And by the way, taking that blood away from other parts of his body, the digestive system, other parts of the brain, other parts of his body that aren't really needed for this fight or flight response. So this whole cascade of events actually has happened to him automatically. He didn't ask for the stress response. It just came to him. And, historically, when you think back to those ancestors, once again, if you met this guy, as you're going down the trail, you need that response to happen automatically and quickly. You can't really sit there and say to yourself, this guy doesn't look too friendly. He's got some sharp teeth. He looks like he might not like me too much. No, you need to very quickly get ready to either fight or make a really fast exit. But fast forward to today, and many of the sources of stress in our own lives are different, right? So we all know about stress. If I were to go around and ask you how many have experienced something stressful in the last week, maybe in the last hour, I can tell you from experience, everybody would raise a hand. But when you're facing maybe a deadline at work, maybe a conflict with your partner, a disagreement, financial challenges, maybe a health issue, running away or drawing your sword to fight is not going to be a really effective strategy. Instead, we really need to engage different parts of our brain, the parts that can reason, the parts that can communicate, that can process language. And unfortunately, those are some of the same areas of the brain that are being kind of deactivated, de-accentuated when our bodies turn to this fight or flight response. So when it comes to stress, another thing that we all know well is that grief, it doesn't help. If you have lost someone yourself, or if you're in a position of working with people who have suffered a loss, you know that grief can generate a huge flood of emotion. You may be experiencing shock, disbelief. How could this possibly have happened? Where did this come from? You may be experiencing a lot of anger. Why him? Why her? Why me? Why us? Fear, anxiety, very common. What's going to happen now? How will I cope? How will my family cope? You might be experiencing a deep sadness, kind of a hole that needs to be filled, an emptiness. We also experience many physical symptoms of grief, right? Maybe insomnia, maybe just a feeling of agitation, sometimes a literal heartache, a headache. There are cognitive effects of grief, an inability to focus, an inability to really be present as we used to be. We may become angry or frustrated with the very people that are trying to help us, and then become angry and frustrated with ourselves for our anger. All of this can make us feel like life is spinning out of control. And guess what? At the same time, all those other causes of stress that we just talked about, they haven't gone away. We still have that health issue. We still have work. We still have the stress of a relationship that maybe isn't going so well, right? In fact, in some cases, the loss has made that situation worse. Our financial situation may have significantly changed with the loss of a partner. There are other indications in our life, other situations in our life that may have changed for the worse because of this loss. And so, not surprisingly, what do we think is happening to that comfort zone? Yeah, so it's gotten pretty small. These zones of experience shrink and expand based on what's happening in our lives. And after a significant loss, we are thrown headlong into that uncharted territory. Nothing feels the same. Everything in our life has shifted. And our concept of the future has even shifted. Nothing at all may be feeling safe or predictable. And by the way, I should mention that, this same effect happens regardless of the nature of the loss. It could be expected or unexpected. It could be the loss of a person, but it could also be the loss of a job, a home, a relationship, or something else that's been a significant part of our lives and our sense of identity. And so it leads us to the essential question of how can we regain our sense of balance after a loss that has hit us deeply? When we're in that state of overwhelm, what can we do? So to begin to just answer that question, I want to take a step back and talk about how we typically manage stress. There are a few kind of widely recognized approaches, and all of them can actually be effective in certain situations. So one approach is to change the situation. If you can avoid that stressor, that's a great way to go. And in some cases, it's actually possible. So for example, if you find that driving down the highway is always crowded, full of those crazy Jersey drivers here, or the Florida drivers, or wherever you're calling in from, I'm sure we all have crazy drivers, and you're getting to work very stressed, very upset, you may be able to make the choice to leave 5-10 minutes earlier and take the back roads and arrive to work in a different state of mind. Sometimes it's very practical, but in many cases, the stresses in our lives cannot be easily avoided, right? So the sources of stress may be health issues, financial issues, something like grief or loss, the loss of a relationship or issues in a relationship itself. We can't just avoid those situations. We need other solutions. And so another option that can also be really helpful is to activate what's called our relaxation response. Now, we may not think of it in those terms, but that's something that we all already do and already know. Just as our brains activate a stress response when we are feeling threatened, or when our brains perceive a threat, our brains can also activate something called a relaxation response when they perceive safety and security. And we can stimulate that in any number of ways. Many of us can choose to exercise, perhaps if you're artistic, some form of artistic expression, drawing, music, poetry. something that helps you to disconnect with the stress and connect with a place of more ease. Getting out into nature, that's one that's very important for me. Maybe connecting with a friend. All of these and many more are kind of classic responses to stress, because all of these can activate your parasympathetic nervous system and help you to release the stress. So one thing I want to point out is that meditation is an option here for some of us. This is where if we can take a few deep breaths, as we sometimes recommend at Good Grief, sit in silence for just a moment or two. That can actually help us to find a few moments of calm and generate that same relaxation response, releasing those endorphins and other very positive, beautiful, wonderful chemicals in our brains that help us to feel more relaxed. So all of these techniques can relieve stress in the moment, which is very helpful. It's a short-term solution and one I would highly recommend. But it doesn't touch into the root causes of stress. So there is a third approach, which is very interesting and which is where we're going to turn next. And that is to actually find a way to adopt new responses to that stress. So we all have a lot of habitual responses to stress. And there's actually some wonderful work by a guy named Judson Brewer. He's currently up at Brown. He's done a lot of work on what he refers to as habit loops. So basically, he has a TED Talk. I've actually posted that link here, where he describes something he calls a habit loop. And it's really based on the idea of positive reinforcement, right? Which is how we learned. Another thing perhaps you learned back in high school psychology or as a student in college. For example, you're sitting there, you're reading, you're watching TV, your dog comes up, puts his head in your lap, and he starts to whine. That would be the trigger in this model, right? So you reach down, you start to pet your dog. That's your behavior, right? You started to pet your dog. Your dog stops whining, he curls up on the floor by your feet, and that makes you feel like you're a really good pet parent. And so that's your reward. You feel good. And so those positive feelings then in this model make it more likely that when that trigger arises again, your dog comes in, puts his head on your lap, starts to whine, you're going to pursue the same behavior, right? Over time, that's how we develop habits. And actually, I took a fascinating class with this guy, highly recommend him or his work. We all have so many of these habit patterns in our daily lives. And by the way, your dog in this situation has just trained you to give him or her a little more attention. So some of those habits that we have, they can be really helpful, right? So we don't want to have to get up in the morning every single day and figure out how to make coffee, how to get dressed. We develop habits that make our lives easier. So our brain can say, okay, I learned this. I know how to get dressed. I know how to make coffee. And we can put those activities sort of on the back burner and not think about them anymore. That saves our brain power for things that are more important. That's actually really great. Sometimes, though, our habits are not so helpful. So particularly when a stressful situation arises, we may find that before we know it, we have lashed out at our partner, at a colleague, and whatever we've said has had a negative effect on the relationship and maybe made things a little rocky for the next couple of weeks or so. We may find that we get a stressful email. We're sitting there at work, and before we know it, we've walked into the kitchen or the break room and we've grabbed a bag of chips and we're starting to eat before we even know we're there. We're just kind of responding to that stress, right? By becoming a little more mindful of our present moment experience, Dr. Brewer suggests that perhaps we can actually identify new ways to respond and break that cycle of a habit loop. I think that's a really powerful concept. So here's another very simple way to look at it. If we have a very strong habit, We're exposed to a stressor, we have a response, whether that's driven by our own habit patterns or whether it's driven by that stress response itself, the physical response. Oftentimes, they both go together. You can envision it as the stressor and the response. There's very little space in between, if any. Before you know it, the whole process happens very, very quickly. We get that email and we grab the bag of chips, right? What mindfulness has the power to do is to interject a moment of awareness into that process. So we may still go grab that bag of chips, but we are now kind of more aware of what we're doing and why we're doing it, right? We bring a little curiosity. We say to ourselves, oh, yeah, I'm stressed, and look, here I am grabbing those chips again. We may recognize at some point that eating may be making us feel better in that moment, but long term, maybe not so great. Over time, our growing awareness, our growing mindfulness can actually create more space between the stimulus, the stressful email, right? And our response of grabbing the chips. And in that space, we may actually become aware of other options. We could choose to respond that same way, but we might choose to make a different choice. Mindfulness is giving back our ability to choose a response. It's giving back our agency in that moment. And I think that's a really powerful idea. So at this point, I'd actually like to take just a step back and take a look at mindfulness itself. And then in a few minutes, we'll move into a period of practice. I'm sure there are those of you on this call who have some experience with mindfulness. And I'd actually like to encourage you to hop on the chat now if you'd like, and maybe just share a few words, a couple of thoughts on what that word mindfulness, what mindfulness practice means to you. And I do believe the chat is open. Yes?
Yes, it is.
Beautiful, thank you. So yeah, being present. Lots of thoughts about the present moment. Not limiting yourself to what you're feeling. Awareness, attention to your body. I'm seeing absence of judgment. That word intentional. Taking time to breathe. That space before reacting. Giving yourself grace. Yeah. Being in tune with nature and my nature. In a mindful way. Yeah, very fulfilling. Clearing your head, very practical. Feeling of inner peace and calm. Looking inwards instead of focusing always on the outside. Yeah. Thank you. Feel free to keep contributing. I see attentive. I can tell there's a lot of wisdom in this room, as there always is. As there always is, yeah. So I'd like to just share one definition, incorporating many of these same ideas. And that is a definition from John Kabat-Zinn, who is the founder of the mindfulness-based stress reduction program. And his definition that he tends to offer is paying attention on purpose to the present moment without judgment. And so we saw all of these components and others reflected in the wisdom of this room. Before we dive into practice, I want to just focus on a couple of these ideas in turn. So first, this idea of paying attention on purpose. Our awareness is something that is always there, but mindfulness isn't. Mindfulness is a little different from that. Mindfulness is intentional. It brings in that aspect of paying attention on purpose. We're actively directing our attention to something in particular. And in this case, it's to whatever's happening in the present moment. And this idea of the present moment is really significant. And I think many of you are aware. I saw many people citing that as part of a key part of the definition. So many, if not all, of the meditative traditions of our world have a focus on present moment awareness, right? So first and foremost, this is really used as a training, as a way of training your mind, coming back to the present. We're training our minds to be more focused, more attentive in general, and that's a good thing. But one could ask, and I've heard people ask, what is really so great about the present moment, right? Maybe I would be a little happier if I'm daydreaming. Yeah, thinking about that vacation in Hawaii, what's wrong with that? Maybe I need to think about the next thing on my list. And so daydreaming can be a fantastic way to relax for sure. And there's certainly a time and a place in our lives for planning. We all need to do that. We need to set aside time to plan. And in fact, when we're planning, that's what we're doing in that present moment. But there is research that shows that human beings are actually happiest when our attention is focused on exactly what we're doing right now. And I just want to share a really interesting study with you. This is by some researchers. It was published in 2010 in the journal Science. A couple of Harvard psychologists named Matthew Killingsworth and Daniel Gilbert. And they did a study where they had about upwards of 2,000 participants. And they gave them all an app, and they contacted them just via the app on their phone at random times during their daily lives. And they asked them to record 3 things. What are you doing right now? Where is your mind focused right now? And how happy are you right now? And they gave them a numerical scale to rate their happiness. So the participants in this study reported that their minds were actually focused on something besides what they were doing. Their minds were wandering 47% of the time. They were not paying attention to what they're doing. Their minds were somewhere completely different. They were missing what was in front of them. So that study was conducted in 2010. In all likelihood, it is worse today. We have the ongoing proliferation of social media, of the 24-hour news cycle, just the rapid pace of our lives. In terms of our happiness, though, this is not good news, right? So this same study found that a wandering mind is an unhappy mind. Killingsworth reported that mind wandering turned out to be the #1 predictor of people's happiness or unhappiness. If your mind is focused on what you're doing, you're happier. When our minds are distracted, they're not so happy. And that was true regardless of the activity in which people were participating. So in other words, we don't have to like what we're doing to be more happy by keeping our attention there, right? We might be doing something we don't particularly like, or more likely something that we don't like or dislike. It's just sort of neutral, just sort of there. Still, even in those situations, the number one predictor of happiness was being able to keep your mind on that task. So the good news here is that mindfulness is a skill that we can strengthen with practice. It's something that we can learn. It's a skill. Before we start our own practice, I also want to focus in on the third phrase here because it's really so important. We need to practice without judgment. So you've probably noticed that our minds are very quick to judge, right? Perhaps while you're listening to me, you're judging me. She should pick up the pace. Why is she wearing blue? Whatever, right? Or perhaps you're judging yourself. Perhaps you're saying, oh, wait, what was that last slide? I missed that. How can I be listening to a talk on mindfulness without paying attention? We can feel at times, as which we all have this happens to me a lot, this little narrator in our head, right? Commenting on our moment to moment experience. Often though, when we really tune in to that inner voice, what we notice is that, we're not really terribly kind to ourselves, are we? That inner narrator is often an inner critic, pointing out all of our faults, all our flaws, all our shortcomings, especially when we're trying something new. So it's important to suspend that judgment and allow ourselves to be just as we are, both in our daily lives and especially when we sit down to meditate. And here's why. For many of us, somewhere along the road, we have encountered this idea that mindfulness is the total absence of thought, right? I bet you've heard that. We think we're going to sit down and meditate. We will immediately be transported to this world of bliss where there will be no thought, no emotion, nothing, just this beautiful, beautiful cloud of happiness. As soon as you actually try meditating, you quickly notice that that is not the case, right? We sit down, we notice one thought after another, right? Maybe we're rehashing a conversation we just had. Maybe we're thinking ahead to what's for lunch or what we're going to do that evening. We are anywhere but in the present moment. And then we notice where we are, right? We notice that our mind has drifted away. And here comes that inner critic again, right? He's saying, oh, you're thinking, you are doing this all wrong. You will never learn to meditate. Just give up. You shouldn't be doing this. And of course, the reality is that our minds were built to think. Our eyes were made to see, our ears were made to hear, our minds were built to think. Fortunately, the truth is that mindfulness practice is not about the absence of thought, or for that matter, about the absence of emotion. When we practice, we can and we will notice that our thoughts are arising and then they're passing away. Those thoughts are a part of our present moment experience, and there's no reason at all to kind of beat ourselves up for something that our mind will naturally do. The key is in how we respond to what happens. We can notice when a thought or an emotion arises, bring a sense of kind curiosity. Look at that, my mind is running off down that path again. And then just let that thought go and kind of gently guide your attention back where you wanted it, back to your breath, back to the sense of sitting, wherever you are, back to the present moment. That helps us to be ready for whatever happens next. So now I'm going to invite us to experience mindfulness practice. For some of you, this may not be new, and for others, it may be. So I'll be offering some gentle instructions. And to begin, since we've all been sitting for, at least half an hour now, I want to invite us to just reconnect with our bodies with a couple of quick stretches. So, if you like, if you're comfortable in the space where you are, you can even stand. And I'm just going to invite you to sit or stand quietly, just kind of center your weight, center yourself. And then just slowly to start to lift both of your arms out, straight out to the side. Maybe even closing your eyes, directing your gaze down so you can focus in on the sensation. Perhaps feel the weight of gravity wanting to push your arms back down as you hold them there. And then continuing to lift your arms, if it works for you, until both arms are reaching straight up overhead. Just sensing in as you move to the sensations that you feel as you make this movement. Maybe a stretching in your arms, sensation in your shoulders, maybe a sense of openness in your chest, or your belly. And then very slowly, just allowing your arms to drop back down. Focusing your attention on the sensations that arise for you as you're making just this very simple movement. And continuing till your arms are right back down by your side. And we're going to just repeat that movement. So inviting you to lift your arms gently again, slowly, till you're reaching straight up overhead. And this time inviting you to just maybe clasp your hands together and to lean maybe gently toward the right. Feeling the stretch along your left arm, down through the shoulder, and the left side of your body. Taking a deep breath and noticing how that sensation changes as you breathe. Then gently coming back to center and repeating the motion by leaning to your left side. Feeling the stretch in your arm and your side. And then noticing how things might be different on this side of your body. And then when you're ready, coming back to center and slowly dropping your arms back down to settle again by your sides or on your lap. And then inviting you to just lift your shoulders up towards your ears and then roll them back gently, almost as if your shoulder blades wanted to touch. And then down and forward, just doing a couple of shoulder rolls, first back. And then when you're ready, switching directions to roll your shoulders forward a couple of times. And then when you feel your body is done with that movement, just coming back to a place of quiet. And when you're ready, inviting you to return to your seat if you're standing. And settle into a comfortable but an upright posture where you can breathe in and out with a sense of ease. And we'll move now into a brief meditation practice. You're welcome to sit in your chair or on the floor if that's most comfortable. It is helpful to find a place where you can sit up straight and breathe easily, where you can allow your shoulders to relax and your hands to rest very gently, either in your lap or on a chair. It's also helpful to either close your eyes or cast your gaze down so that you can focus your attention on your inner experience. So to begin, just inviting you to bring your attention to the sensation of your body sitting. Noticing what you feel. You may sense the weight of your body pressing against the chair, the weight of your feet resting on the floor. Maybe a sense of warmth or of coolness as the air touches your hands. Maybe the texture of the fabric as your hands rest on a chair or on your lap. And then just inviting you to scan through your body from head to toe and release any tension that we find as you go. Our bodies carry a lot of wisdom, and they also carry tension. So scanning down through your head, maybe the area around your eyes or your jaw, any sense of tension you find, just inviting that to soften and to ease. Continuing down through your neck and your shoulders, inviting a sense of comfort and relaxation through your arms, your hands, your fingers. Relaxing any tension that you find and settling deeply into a posture of comfort and stillness. Continuing down through your lower body, through your belly, your legs, all the way down to the sensation of your feet resting on the floor. And then just inviting you to take a couple of deep breaths and really connect with the sensation of your body breathing. Exploring where right now you feel the sensation of breathing most distinctly. Perhaps you feel the air coming in through your nose, the sensation of the coolness of the air coming in, and the warmth of the air coming back out as you breathe out. Or perhaps you feel your breath in your chest, rising with each in-breath, falling with each out-breath. Or maybe you feel it most distinctly in your belly, moving in as you breathe out and expanding out as you breathe in the air, connecting deeply with the world around you. So settling into the natural pace of your breath and choosing that place in this body, in your body, where you find it easiest to feel the breath right now. Resting your attention there. And just connecting with the beginning of each in-breath and sustaining that attention as you breathe in. Connecting with the beginning of the out-breath, sustaining the attention as your body breathes out. Just connect and sustain. Connect and sustain. Connect, sustain. In and out. Following the natural rhythm of your breath as it flows in and out of your body. All on its own. When you notice that your mind has wandered away, just gently guiding it back to those sensations of breathing. Connect and sustain. Breathing in, breathing out. Just this. Just now. In and out. If it feels right to you, you might experiment with expanding your attention. Keeping the breath in the background and expanding your attention to feel your whole body. Sitting here, breathing, feeling the support of the chair, the cushion, the earth beneath you. Steady, strong, connected. And as we prepare to bring these few moments of practice to a close, just inviting you to bring a sense of gratitude if it feels right. Gratitude to yourself for taking a few moments to explore this practice. Touching into your own innate capacity to be in this moment, allowing things to be just as they are. When you're ready, I invite you now to open your eyes and reconnect to the world around you. I hope that was a useful introduction to those of you who might be new to this practice, and a moment of calm and reflection for those of you who may have a deep practice of your own. We are going to move on and explore a couple of different ways to practice. But before we do that, I did want to invite you once again to hop on the chat if you would like and just share a few words, a thought about your experience with practice here and now, right now. I see relaxation. Calming, refreshed, like waking from a nap. I also feel that way often. Recharged, clear, yeah. Mm. Chill. Mm. Calm, good. Kim, we're running to 1:30. I see your question, but the session will be taped and you'll receive a link to that tape. A great start. I definitely need practice. Yeah, beautiful. All right. Thank you all so much for sharing. I want to just move on to recognizing the time and just to mention that, you can really think of mindfulness in addition to the wonderful calming qualities. I saw a couple people mentioning, wow, I need to practice. It's a little hard. I need to focus. Just like any other sort of workout that you might do at the gym, some days are going to be easy, things will go well, others, not so much, right? One day you may notice that your thoughts arise and they just quickly drift away, and you do experience a lot of that calm, a lot of that ease. Another day, you might find that your mind is bouncing all over the place. You're getting pulled down the same rabbit holes time and time again. And just like at the gym, I just want to point out that, you have to keep practicing. That's the key. We don't expect instant results when we go to the gym, much as I would like them. And we can't hold that expectation of ourselves when we practice mindfulness either. We need to think of it as a process of continuing to practice, continuing to train our minds in how to settle and how to let go and accept what's happening. So there is often this perception that meditation is the only way that we can practice mindfulness. And I just wanted to highlight here that while I personally view meditation as a really meaningful and valuable part of practice, it is far from the only way to practice mindfulness. So there are many formal practices, that's sitting meditation. There's a type of walking meditation, which may sound a little odd if you've not heard of it, but can be really, really useful, really settling. There are many mindful movement practices, hatha yoga, other types of yoga, tai chi, qigong. There are also informal practices that we can use throughout the day. And for me, this is the real, this is where the rubber meets the road, right? This is the real reason to practice. How can we bring this mindful attitude into our daily lives, right? It's lovely to have a blissful experience while you're meditating. That can certainly bring relaxation and some really interesting insights and experiences. But when it comes down to it, the most important thing for me, and I think for many, is developing our ability to relate to life in a mindful way. So there are specific practices around mindful eating, around mindful dialogue, mindful conversation. One of my teachers likes to use the phrase mindful moments many times. And many people do that. They'll have sort of a mindfulness spell, even like an alarm, things that remind them, every time I get an email, take a moment to be mindful, something like that, to help you remember to be mindful during the course of the day. And that actually leads me back to MBSR, the mindfulness-based stress reduction program, because it incorporates really all of those practices, or many that I just mentioned. So this is Jon Kabat-Zinn, and mindfulness-based stress reduction is a program that he created and founded in 1979, so quite some time ago now, with the goal of helping patients who were not being healed, fully healed by the traditional medical system. So Jon Kabat-Zinn is actually a professor at UMass Medical Center. He was affiliated with that medical center at the time. And the initial program was designed for patients with chronic pain who were being perhaps helped to some extent by their medical treatment, but were not fully relieved of that pain. And so MBSR was designed as a complement to their treatment, not a replacement, but as a complement to help those patients to connect and see what they could do to help to heal themselves. As the benefits of the program started to become obvious, it very quickly expanded. And in fact, at this point, it's become the gold standard for mindfulness training. In fact, the first expansion was certainly to other patients at that hospital, but then guess who else? Doctors, nurses, other hospital employees. And for those of you who have ever worked in a hospital or healthcare environment, those people experience significant stress in their own lives in dealing with all of their patients. So the program is now in use with I've read over 700 hospitals and medical systems, not just around the country and but around the world. And it's been the subject, as you can imagine, in the last 20 years or 40 years, of more than 1,300 scientific studies. Without going into the depth of the research, I can tell you that there have been some very promising indications. I'm going to share some links so you can explore this further for yourselves. But for managing physical conditions, chronic pain, regulating insulin levels, lowering blood pressure or heart rate, relieving symptoms of depression, anxiety, even PTSD. It's now being used by our Veterans Affairs Service in the US to help veterans to deal with their the impact of their service, and for reducing stress overall. So some very promising indications, and interestingly, even for people who are otherwise considered, quote unquote, healthy, no specific diagnosis, people report higher levels of health and well-being from participating in these practices and this program. Just to cite one example for those of you who are very research oriented. So there was a team from Norway led by Michael David. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but his team conducted a meta-analysis, so looking at the results of a whole range of randomized controlled trials of MBSR. So a randomized controlled trial typically would involve a group of people who participated in the MBSR program, and then a population with very similar characteristics who did not, and then comparing the outcomes among those two groups. So the standard, the trials were among a wide variety of populations, including healthy adults and also people who were diagnosed with, I believe 40 of them were depression and quite a number were anxiety and other mental and physical conditions. And their conclusion from looking at these 101 studies was that MBSR had a moderate positive effect on people's mental health, on par with other established interventions. And I'd really like to highlight that phrase, on par with other established interventions, because in many cases that established intervention was medication. And as we all know, medication has the potential of side effects, which can be very difficult to manage for many patients. So I think that's a really exciting finding. If you are interested in some of the research and diving deeper, these are some links that I would offer you. I'm sure we can share these later, or you're welcome to take a screenshot here. John Kabat-Zinn has his own website sharing some of his research. The Mindfulness Center at Brown, that includes work by Judd Brewer, who I mentioned earlier with the habit loop studies. And the Palouse Center for Mindfulness also has a pretty comprehensive listing of individual research studies on MBSR. But before we wrap up and recognizing that our time is passing, I want to just return to this topic of grief and stress. Grief creates stress, right? We all know that. It can create that sense of overwhelm. It can take away our sense of agency and how we deal with our lives. We're faced with this question of how can we regain our balance? So it is clear from the research, and I can confirm from my own experience, that this practice of mindfulness, this can help. But when we're experiencing the pain of loss, when we're really deep in that whirl of emotions, it is especially important, it's always important, but especially important, to bring a real sense of kindness and compassion to our practice. And that is something that we aren't always prone to do. So the word mindfulness itself, it often sounds rather cold or intellectual, right? In reality, we know that the practice brings up many emotions. It's important to bring that compassion to what we're experiencing. This is just a quote here that I love from Sharon Salzberg. Many of you may be familiar with her. She's She's well known for bringing a focus on compassion practice, loving kindness practice to the American, to the Western world. She says that compassion can be thought of as the movement of the heart to recognize our own or someone else's vulnerability. And that by moving towards that person, we want to see if we can help. So kindness and compassion don't necessarily come naturally to Western minds, and that is particularly true when it comes to ourselves. So I want to turn back to that idea of that inner critic. Too often, when we experience a loss or something challenging, we forget to bring compassion to ourselves. We may tell ourselves to be strong. The sadness or the anger pops up, we try to push them away, pretend we're not there. And by the way, our society may actually support those tendencies, right? We see all these perfect lives on social media, on other types of media, and there seems to be this expectation that whatever comes up, we should just deal with it, we should get over it. When we experience loss, we often perceive that there's some sort of a timeline out there. You know, we feel we run into the expectation that we should be over it already. At least that's how we perceive it. And so Dr. Kristen Neff, who's at the University of Texas in Austin, has done a lot of work in this area, particularly on the topic of bringing self-compassion into our practice. And she suggests another approach. When we are feeling those feelings of stress from grief or loss or any other significant challenge in our lives, she suggests that we ask ourselves the question, how would you treat a close friend who was going through this same experience? What would you say to your friend? You might tell your friend that you understand why they feel the way they do. You might point out that anyone would be angry or sad or depressed in a similar situation. Painful emotions are a part of being human, especially in response to a loss. You might simply offer a gentle hug to your friend and a promise that you'll be there. Sit with them, be by their side. You might encourage your friend to take a break, go for a walk, have a cup of tea, and be kind to themselves. Neff's suggestion is that we need to start treating ourselves just the same way. She proposes that when a difficult emotion arises during our meditation practice or during our daily life, we take a moment for what she refers to as a self-compassion break. And I love this idea. There are 3 steps. The first step is simply to be mindful, notice, and allow how you're feeling. Oh, this is a difficult moment for me. I'm sad. The second step is to recognize that how you're feeling is a normal and natural part of being human. All of our lives include times of joy, but also times of difficulty, times of loss. And our emotional response is a natural part of that package. And then the third step is to respond to how you're feeling with compassion. Ask yourself what it is you need in this moment, just like you might ask a friend. Do you need to take a break? Do you need to step away? Do you need to call a friend? Whatever you need, try to provide that same compassion to yourself that you would provide to a good friend who is suffering. When I lost my son, it was a combination of mindfulness and compassion, which I learned from so many wonderful teachers and which I felt from so many in the community, that led to healing. By meditating, I found moments of peace, very short moments at first. But over time, I found that those moments grew longer. I learned how to wrap my painful feelings in compassion and understanding, to accept them and allow them to be there, and just hold them with a spirit of gentleness and of kindness. And slowly, as time passed, I found that I was able to feel other emotions as well. Love for my son, gratitude for the time we had together, gratitude for the wonderful people in my life who helped me through this time, and a sense of compassion for others who were going through a similar experience. The pain was, and the pain is still very real. But over time, that sense of balance did begin to return. So whether you are grieving a loss in your own life, or whether you are working with others who may have experienced a loss recently and are working through the process of grief, I would encourage you to really explore this practice of mindfulness and to bring a lens of compassion on that practice. It was healing for myself, and I believe it can be healing for others. And I'll just leave you then to wrap up here with some words from John Kabat-Zinn. This is one of my favorite quotes. You can never stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. So thank you all. Thank you all who were able to hang in there longer than an hour. And now I believe I do know how to end the slideshow without technical difficulties. So let's see if we can't stop a screen share. There we go.
Thank you. So if anyone has questions, if you want to put them in the chat, I know there's at least one in the Q&A. I'm seeing a lot of praise rolling through in the chat just for your willingness to share your story, to share your son, to share mindfulness. Lots of affirmations in the chat. In the Q&A, someone did ask about daydreaming. You know, how does daydreaming fit into wandering minds? Is the difference is that daydreaming can be when you don't need to focus, whereas a wandering mind is when you need to be focused but are incapable of focusing. So
yeah, I mean, it's kind of a fuzzy definition there, right? So I think that this idea of a wandering mind is something that, you know, if you're trying to focus and your mind is somewhere else, then we call that wandering. But the idea of daydreaming could also be just thinking about the future in kind of an open-ended way. And I do think that that can be sometimes relaxing for people. But maybe like a lot of things in our lives, there's a time and a place. I don't know if that's helpful for whoever had asked. Yeah.
They were anonymous.
They were anonymous. An anonymous daydreamer.
Yeah.
Whoever you are, I've been there. I daydream.
There's another question in the chat that says, it's from Rosa. And it said, mindfulness is hard. Are there any tips for those of us who find it harder to do?
Sure. So I think that the key for me, at least, is sort of to start slowly. And I do find it helpful to have some kind of guidance, right? So there are some wonderful apps out there that I would mention. There are a lot of apps out there, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend all of them. But there are a couple that I would kind of point people towards. One is an app called Medito that takes a very simple approach to mindfulness, similar to what I kind of shared with you here, right? where you can choose just a very short practice, but they will provide some guidance. Sometimes that kind of auditory reminder, okay, come back to your breath, can be particularly helpful as you're starting out, as you're learning to sit and meditate for the first time. I've heard it said often that meditating for just a couple minutes several times a day can be much more accessible to people as you begin to practice than jumping into trying to do, 45 minutes at once if you've never practiced before. That may just kind of shoot you over the edge.
Just looking to see if there's any
Yeah.
other questions. I see we've got some friends with their hands raised. If you want to hop in the chat or the Q&A function, feel free to do so. We'll see if anything else pops
Yeah, I'm
up.
looking in the Q&A myself. I also love that quote, Michael, by John Kabat-Zinn. For me, Michael adds, mindfulness is about making the workings and natures of life and of my mind work for me to achieve what is most important and to be in balance and harmony. I feel waves exist and we can make them work for us and in service to others. Thank you, Michael. That's beautiful. And I agree with those words wholeheartedly. Thank you.
And there was a question, if you led a class, if they may join. That's from
Led a
Susan.
class? Yes, you may certainly
If
join.
you led a class, can I join? I'd love to join as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, maybe that's something we could consider. I'm not leading classes actively right now, but would love to do that. Yeah.
All right. Well, I just want to say out loud that the conversation doesn't have to stop here during the session. You can always feel free to reach out to any of us. I'm going to pull my screen share back up, just looking at the time, so that way Annette can take us through the next few webinar sessions. So let me get that up, folks.
So I believe Evelyn already put these links into the chat. On our upcoming webinars in February, there's going to be one on exploring grief and loss, and it is 100% in Spanish. So if you yourself or anyone in your community that would really benefit from a very basic exploration of grief and loss in Spanish, I please invite you to join me. We also have on Thursday, March 21st, with Sarah King, and it's Scribbling Hope, Vision Journaling Through Loss. I'm very excited for that one as well. And then in April, we have Songs of Solace, and it's a guide to coping with grief through music. And our presenter will be Jay Swanson, and they're absolutely amazing. So please join us for all of those. For more information or to register for that, you can just go to our website that's on the screen right now, goodgrief.org/training.
Yes, and on our website, you can also find information about our upcoming Spring Institute, March 16th. Our featured speaker will be Michael Cruz Kane, the creator of the one-man show, Sorry for Your Loss. So we would love to see you there. Good Grief has tons of free resources, good-grief.org/resources. All of our webinars on our YouTube channel. But like I said, feel free to reach out. I'm Evelyn with 2 N's at good-grief.org. You can reach out to Annette as well. So just want to say thank you. 2 N's, 2 T's with Annette. But thank you so much, everyone, for your time, for your attention, for really trying this on today. Thank you, Diana, for sharing with us. So grateful.
And thank you for the opportunity. I'm delighted to be able to share and to bring this to our community.
Absolutely. So thank you, everyone. I am going to stop our recording, and I hope you all have an amazing week, an amazing weekend, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye, guys.